So I'm going to start by asking you a couple questions in regard to climate change. So the first one would be, in what ways would you say climate has already impacted our society?
So I think that first of all, it impacted our society in the sense that people have started already to be more aware of it. For sure, people are starting to want to learn more about it. People are starting to be more invested. I think that we can compare in the last decade, like for examples, like clubs and environmentalists that are coming forward and trying to really create something good, create something better for the society. I think already we are also seeing the early impacts of, or I could say already we're right in it, of climate change. For example, like our underdeveloped countries who are being affected by it in traumatic ways, whether it's in regards to natural disasters or just, we are seeing it. And I think it's impacted our society already in a negative way, not necessarily for the best whatsoever, but I think that we can try and make something good out of it, and I'm excited to see if we're going to be able to.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Have you ever taken part in an environmental club or movement? If not, why not? And if so, elaborate on your personal experience.
Actually, my first ever environmental club that I was part of was in grade 4 in elementary school. At my school, they were very big on the environment. Everything we would do would be in regards to bettering the environment and keeping it a safe, green zone for everyone. And I was actually head of my environment club at the time, which was really interesting because we would just basically discuss new ways that we were able to innovate in our school and create new ways to better, like for example, sometimes we would go and we even planted trees once. We would make sure we personally went through all that was garbage, compost. We really made sure that everything was in the right order, everything was in the right place. Like honestly, it's things that sometimes we don't always feel like doing, but we don't realize that they do actually make a change. And it is by taking these little baby steps that eventually we're going to be able to obtain actual real change. And basically, my experience was overall really good. Ever since then, I have been going to certain environmental meetings, and for sure, when there are climate change talks or teachers that come to speak of us about climate, it's always really interesting. And my experience has been overall good, and I think everyone should try and take the opportunity to either be part of a club, go to a meeting, be part of a movement like the climate change that we just saw, and it is truly important for our society.
I really like that. I really like that. I should take part in that kind of clubs.
Everyone should.
In what ways have you changed your habits regarding living at home since climate change has become a well-spoken topic?
Um, well, basically, in regards to my at-home situation, just to give a little background, I think my whole family is trying to be invested and trying to forward the cause in any way that we can. So I truly think that it's about, starting by taking small baby steps. So, for example, I personally made the choice around a year ago to try and cut red meat out of my life as much as possible. So that's in terms of, that connects to the aspect of more like cooking and food related living at home situation. In regards to just brushing my teeth, taking my shower, I try to take shorter showers, preserve the water. Also, when I'm brushing my teeth, I make sure that the tap is always closed. That's kind of like a habit that I had always taken into account for ever since, my days as a little environment club girl in elementary school. But exactly, like I said, and really, we try to compost, we try to recycle as much as possible, really take the time, even when you don't have it, to not just throw everything in the garbage. So it's those little baby steps, and also a very, very big important one, when you aren't in a certain part of the house or in a room, to turn the lights off is extremely important. And I don't think enough people realize that, how much energy it consumes. And so I'd say all in all, just in regards to the lights, shutting your water off, taking shorter showers, adapting your nutritional way of life, and it's something that just your whole family can collaborate and move together with.
What have you changed in regards to your eating habits?
Oh, well, I basically kind of elaborated on this earlier, but I cut out red meat. Well, there are some exceptions, I'm not going to lie, where I resorted to eating it either way, but as much as possible, I really tried to cut it out. In regards to, I don't know if can I elaborate on someone else?
Yeah.
So I have a lot of people in my friend group that are actually vegan/vegetarian, which I think also I have some friends who are pescatarians, which I find is truly amazing. And it doesn't necessarily, it shows that there can be change made from something so little, or to certain people something so big, because if you're a meat lover and you're someone who puts meat with everything, for certain it is a big change, although it does contribute so much to bettering the environment, and I truly think that people don't realize that. And whether it's just simply, like I said, cutting out red meat, it's really the baby steps, once again, that help. But in regards to that, I'd say also, when cooking, I try to make sure that all my electronics, it's not really what it's called, but the hardware in the kitchen is shut off when I'm not using it. Try and use less water, only what is appropriate, what I need. If not, I try to eat as much as possible local and organic foods. I know it's not always easy to get local, especially when certain elements aren't in season, for example, like the fruits we get from Florida and everything, because transportation does really have a huge impact on climate change. Although it's not always possible, it is a very good way to adapt your eating habits to the current situation. And yeah, I think that kind of sums it up.
Those dieting regimes you've been talking about, have you tried any of them? Like being vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian? I know you cut red meat, but like,
yeah, I have
going further than that.
I have actually, for a period of, I believe it was even over 6 months, I actually cut fish completely. Some people actually resort to only eating fish, and others it's in a way because obviously our sea creatures and our sea mammals are at risk as well. And I completely cut that out of my diet, which was honestly really interesting. I think that any little dieting regime, or it doesn't, I don't really like the term dieting regime because certain people see it as a diet and you're just doing it, it is better for your own health as well, but it's not necessarily the primary reason, but it is a plus. Although I do think it makes yourself feel better, it makes yourself feel as if you're actually doing something for the environment, the society. And so, yeah, I think they're great, and I have taken part in it. I do wish to one day possibly be vegetarian. It is a plan along the way, I'd say. But, yeah, I try to do the best as I can, I guess.
Yeah. Besides issues related to eating habits, what other aspects do you believe us humans do to affect climate change?
Wow. Okay. Besides eating habits, so in terms of eating habits, let's say we're speaking of meat consumption strictly or whatsoever, I think that we contribute to climate change in a negative manner.
In a positive manner. Like, what can you do to
Okay.
help? Like,
Okay,
besides
yeah, for
eating habit, like besides becoming
Yeah,
vegetarian,
okay.
let's say for like transportation, consumption, other stuff like that.
Okay. For sure. I mean, there are ways to adapt your transportation. Use commutative lifts, and so carpooling is a great one. Even at our school, we have a carpooling system, and there is lots of, basically on our Omnibox, it's written and you can see the whole system. It's there during the summer so that you can sign up for it, and it's really cool because, you know, it initiates people to say, hey, you don't have to take your car, hey, you don't have to waste more gas, you know, we can, hopefully when you're all going to the same destination or the same point. So I think that's definitely a way. Also, using more public transportation. I mean, we'd rather be 40 people in one bus than 40 people in our individual cars. It's one fuel consumption rather than 40, which I think is truly interesting. If not, I mean, once again, contributing to environmental movements, taking the time to go to a meeting regarding bettering the climate issue. I mean, just what we do around the house as well, what I was discussing in regards to, you know, the little steps that you can just do that honestly make everyone's life better, because at the end of the day, you are looking out for your own life, because the planet will always, hopefully, find a way to bounce back. You know, it's Mother Nature, although our society, will we be able to? I think that is yet to be determined.
Have you ever heard of buying in bulk? That's something that can help with plastic. And do you believe that we should all do it and that it's really helping our climate? And have you ever tried buying in bulk?
Honestly, I've never personally tried it myself. I know my mother has, and she's a huge fan of it. I mean, I think regarding these kind of techniques or ways to improve, especially our plastic consumption, which is, I forgot to mention earlier, a big issue regarding climate. Evidently, the amount of plastic we use in our everyday lives is just simply abusive and unnecessary to all means. But I think that any sort of thing like that could help, and I think that I personally haven't done enough research in regards to the pros and cons necessarily. But from what I've heard, it seems like a great adaptive way and a way to adapt to the current situation.
Mm-hmm. In what ways has your school made climate change a pressing issue to which we must pay attention to?
Well, I find this really interesting because I do think that our school, of course, we can always do more, as we say, but I do think that our school has been doing some really interesting things. I have a friend, for example, who had a women's rights class, yet one day they were actually supposed to draw banners and everything, and they actually participated in a walk across the school, which was supporting climate change through women's rights, which is honestly really cool. That's a whole other aspect that I'm not really going to get into. But women's rights and climate change are enticed and directly related, and I think not enough people see that. That's another very big issue and like a heavily debated point. But so that was really cool. Also, they made very large propaganda in regards to positive propaganda in regards to the climate change walk, which I thought was really nice. We even got a day off thanks to our student council for it, so that it really, you know, pushed the students to go out, whether they were going out with the intent of bettering the environment or simply going out because, oh, I have a day off. You know, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because they were there and it sent a message, and I think that's the best part of it. So the school really did well on that, even with the public transportation. So basically the community buses that were offered at the school to bring them to that location, I thought was great. Also, in one of my humanities classes, I had one of our social teachers at the school come speak to us and give us a PowerPoint presentation. I believe she is a climate activist as well. And she gave a presentation on basically the current risks we face, the risks we have faced, and how they have worsened and or become more alarming. And basically it was also a Q&A where we could just discuss how we felt about it. Of course, it's scary, but at the end of the day, we have to pay attention to it or else we're all kind of doomed. But so that's really interesting. Teachers actually taking the time out of their own class, apart from their own class time and all, and really trying to get through to students and make them realize. And also, just to top it off, I see around the school a lot. We often have a lot of banners. I know there are even clubs that are organized in regards to bettering it. And I think that's really cool because people are taking the initiative, and that's exactly what we need. And yeah, so I do think that the school has been trying the best of its abilities to make a change, and I think that we're most probably in the next year going to see an even bigger change and even more propaganda in regards to climate change, and I think that's cool, and I think that's good. Oh, also, one last thing, I know I talk a lot, but a lot of our, a lot of our projects have been related or, regarded on the issue of climate change itself. Even in my political science class, we have many debates on it. It has even become a topic in our politics, something that people really regard. So I think that's really interesting how even our school-related projects, assignments, tests, or whatever are pointing to it and clearly opening our eyes to it.
What is your opinion regarding non-believers of climate change?
Ooh. Okay. I'm going to try not to be biased, but I think I'm going to be no matter what. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think, you know what though? I think that even though I am being very judgmental at the moment, that we can't judge these people because it simply shows that they have either a lack of understanding or knowledge of it. The people who, in my opinion, are non-believers of it, of the cause, is greatly due to the fact that they simply don't know the scientific evidence and they simply aren't aware of just how bad it is, and they're just letting themselves be carried away by the good picture and what looks easy. A lot of people also resort to being a non-believer because they don't want to face the consequences and the actual risks and the problems that we're going to face. They just want to think that every day is rainbows and sunshine, yet that really isn't the case. I feel like we can't judge them, and I wish there would be a way for us to. And I think, that percentage will come down the more that we push the issue, the more that we come out with proof, the more, honestly, it saddens me to say this, but the more that we're affected by it, I think people are finally going to start realizing, oh, okay, this is real. And, oh, okay, I really do have to pay attention to this. And I think that truly is eye-opening, and in a sense, I think we can profit and or benefit from these non-believers in the sense that we show the true change between someone who didn't believe versus someone who now does, and the evolution through that and why they do. And initially that person might even be pushed to do more than all the others who have been believing from the start. So I find that really interesting. So I think, in a sense, we can't denigrate, we can't be against it, although we do have to find ways to further push the issue and find ways to make people understand who aren't really, not necessarily open to learning more about it, but, up to date or current with certain things, to really find a way to reach out to every single individual, no matter the educational background, no matter the community or where they're from, no matter the neighborhood or whatsoever. Just truly find ways to reach out to every single person, and I think that we can change their opinions, so I don't think it's something to stress about too much, but I do think that it's something that we need to pay attention to, but that can also change. So it's very interesting conflict.
Yeah. In what ways do you know of transport affecting climate change? Specifically, how can we modify our transportation methods? You talked about it a bit earlier. Are you someone that drives? Do you own a car? Or are you?
Me, myself, I actually do not own a car. The whole debate behind it is quite difficult because evidently when you have a car, you get to point A to point Z in 2 seconds. You can go where you want when you want. One day that might change, though, regarding if our environment allows us to, although for now that's the case. But I do believe, once again, that we should try at least to make an effort towards a different type of method or lifestyle in regards to our transportation. As I've said before, carpooling, buses, metro, they're even thinking of making different lines, creating new transportation, I don't really know how to say this, but maps. Even I am an off-island student, and they even have a bus for us where they adapted to the times that students go to school and whatsoever, and so that's really interesting because I've seen a lot of my friends that do drive and do have a car, yet they still take it because it works for them, and it not saves the planet, but it does sort of contribute to that. So yeah, I think that's interesting. In regards to I know I had a friend and a teacher who's been speaking of electric cars. I'm not necessarily saying you have to resort to the Tesla.
It's more expensive.
But yeah, kind of expensive. Although if you can, that is more than fine, and I dare you to go towards it and to, take that opportunity and drive that Tesla. But the more the better, and it's just better for the environment in general. There are a lot of researches that have been conducted in regards to the Tesla company itself, which are really interesting. And if ever someone's, debating whether they should buy electric or not, I think that's really interesting to look at, and it can be very eye-opening. But if not, just a lot of other companies, I'm not really certain as to which ones specifically, are coming out with new and improved electronic models of cars, and they are affordable. They're, we have a lot of new stations adapting to the electronic cars. It's starting to be something that's growing and growing, and I think it's really interesting. So if you do want a car, and if you do have, the means to have it electric, I think go for it, because honestly, it's the better option, and so I think that's really cool.
Elaborate on the issue of plastic in our oceans and its overproduction in the world.
All right. We kind of touched on this earlier, but plastic is most definitely overused, unnecessarily abused. We live in a society, especially in North America, where production is so, people are so keen on production, and specifically overproduction in regards to anything. This kind of connects to the economic side of it, but when we want something, we have it right away. It's to our disposition. It's there, but that comes from something, and it's not necessarily something positive for the environment. We have all these industries and all these factories that are producing constantly, letting out toxic gases, negative for the environment once again, and the use of plastic is just simply absurd. And there's even use of plastic even when we don't need it. Like, for example, when you receive a package, whether it's UPS or just any package, or you receive a box at the store, and then there's going to be the item you wanted inside of it, that most probably has plastic involved in it, because a lot of items that we buy have plastic, and then we just don't even know it. It's honestly everywhere. And then there's going to be the wrap around it that's also plastic, but that's totally unnecessary, because it's not even as if it's a fragile item or whatsoever. And there are alternatives to protecting an item rather than plastic. And you see, it's like those little things that I think are just unnecessary, and if they could be eliminated, it would be another step in the right direction. And it's overproduction in the world. Well, we can see that even in underdeveloped countries where there are wage laborers in factories and industries that are just pushed to produce this every single day. And honestly, it saddens me, but at the same time, in a sense, it's their economic means. But I think that as a nation or as an international community even, we can come to speak of new alternatives and new ways to resort to something other than plastic, and that could be really interesting. On the side of the plastic in our oceans specifically, I've heard of many organizations, especially some that are supported by celebrities, which I think is great because it really does get the message through, especially through social media, which can be a negative tool, but also amazing in regards to the battle of climate change in and of itself, who are trying to push the issue. There are even bracelets who are made from the items collected in the ocean. There are, seriously guys, like, there are animals dying, there are sea creatures who are suffering, and it's so important. And if ever you do have the opportunity to be part of one of the boat rides or one of the expeditions that go out and just help, one day just picking up all that trash and all that stuff that we as humans just let out so unconscious, it's very conscientious, but just so belligerently, as if we don't really care. And while doing this, we make others suffer that certain people see as lesser than us. But at the end of the day, this is our water that we are polluting, and these are our animals. And what is the earth going to look like when all you can see is just literally floating plastic and trash everywhere? And I think it connects to the broader picture once again, whereas we really need to pay attention to this. And there are a lot of organizations working on this, which I think is amazing and that more people should look into.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you believe more celebrities should propagate the growing risk of climate change? And how are celebrities doing enough for the activist community regarding this issue?
In my opinion, celebrities should do much more than they are right now. It's a new term on social media, whereas influencers, so it's basically someone who has a lot of followers on Instagram that either represents a brand or nothing at all, or just a type of model, or just, influences other people quite literally. I have seen some of them, for example, Alexis Ren, contributing to bettering the climate, posting videos, showing the realities out there, showing the atrocities out there in our oceans once again. And that can be really interesting, although I think that the ones who have the most power don't always profit from it. So I believe that celebrities should use this power and should use their huge database and their following and their followers that they have on all these platforms, and they should push it, because if they're not going to do it, then who is,
Yeah.
Well, in a sense, obviously, but I think that they should try as much as they can. Maybe even those officials of those platforms could even have meetings with them and explain to them, whether, I don't even know what kind of agreement it could be, but I do think that there are ways that we can get them and push them to do more. And it gets the message and it sends the message to more people and it connects to more people. And once again, that's all we really want. And in regards to the activist community, I think that once again, they can be more invested. I know that some of them are, obviously. I'm not generalizing here. I know that some of them are trying their best. But every day, I think that we can all do better.
Do a little more. In what ways is your government adapting to the growing issue, and are your government officials doing enough or not enough, in your opinion?
I think really we were able to see this with our last election, how climate change itself was one of the main topics that voters were looking forward to, that voters were listening on. At the debates that were portrayed on television, people were, primarily listening to this and listening to their opinions of it, what they were going to do to change the current situation. And I think that that's really interesting. Our current government, which is a a minority government of the Liberals led by Justin Trudeau, he, for example, had implemented the carbon tax, which I think is an amazing thing and an amazing beginning to start with. And I am greatly, greatly grateful that that stays intact and in power right now, because it has helped a lot. Also, we know of every single party official that was speaking was thinking in regards to how we could find ways to reduce the gas emissions and the toxicities in the air, as well as we have Elizabeth May, for example, the representative of the Green Party, who is coming Friday to speak to all the students, which I think is really cool. She was actually, well, she had a party platform based on that, and I think it's really cool that she won in certain districts, because it does show that people do care about climate, and she did have some really valid statements regarding what she was going to do to change that. So I think that no matter what we do, the government doesn't have a choice anymore to focus on it and to try and better it, in a sense, because people's attention is turning to this, and it is becoming something that is going to be looked for in a party representative, a party elected official. There are debates that go on in the House of Commons, in the Ottawa Parliament District, every single day in regards to this. And so I think, in regards to the question of whether they're doing enough or not, I think they are doing, if I can say this, but enough, you can never really do enough. You can always push it further, and you can always, evidently there are other things to worry about, of course, as head of state or head of nation, I guess I could say, but or country, more or less. But evidently we can push more, and I do think though that we will start to see even more change regarding climate represented throughout our government officials or party platforms.
Yeah. Do you believe your society is capable of making true change? And explain.
I think I've touched on this many times throughout the other questions, but I do believe our society is capable, 100%. I think that we have to be optimistic. We don't have a choice. We have to have hope. I mean, if change is going to come immediately, absolutely not. If it will come in 10 years, who knows? The point of the matter is that if everyone just tries to make the least of efforts, as I've said before, we are going to get somewhere. And we also do need to face the very, very alarming risks that are those of climate change, that are affecting us already to this day, as I've previously said, and are just going to affect us in worse ways. So we really can't be distraught by this, but we can also be, as a society, we can be captivated and engaged by it and want to do more and want to better ourselves as a society environmentally, but also just as a person, and, feel better about yourself and feel good about how you're treating Mother Nature. So yes, I do believe that society is capable of change, but I do believe that we still have a very long way to go. But it's looking clearer. It's looking clearer.
Well, thank you for letting me interview you today on climate change, and this was very helpful, and I hope everyone continues to take your tips.
Thank you very much.